Homeschooling in Florida has absolutely exploded, and it's kind of creating this unique situation where we are going to have tons and tons of kids applying for colleges as either longtime homeschoolers or partial homeschoolers. So if you sit around for this video, which would be fantastic, I'm going to go over what is going to make a homeschooler, especially in Florida, more competitive as they apply for their college applications. So stick around to the end. There'll be some freebies, but hang on, we're going to get into a lot of details. So why is there this big boom of all these kids, even in high school, starting homeschooling, and especially in Florida? And it's kind of like two factors. There's been a 46% increase in Florida, which is wild. One of the big factors is Florida is actually now the biggest educational choice state in the nation, and they have a $4 to $5 billion program that is funding and giving funds for kids who are choosing to be homeschooled, and parents can use it for tutoring and other like supplementary measures. So that funding is one of the big reasons. The other is with the shutdown of COVID-19, a lot of people actually enjoyed learning from home, and so parents kept it up. But now we are in this weird pickle of how is this going to look, and how is my child going to be competitive against the public school kids? And there is a little bit of nuances, but the cool thing is there's actually a lot of research backing that homeschool kids can be more competitive than public school kids. First things first is you got to get your ducks in a row. As someone who coaches and works with a lot of kids on test prep, I work with a lot of high schoolers, I'm on the phone with a lot of high school parents, is you've got to make sure in high school, no matter if you're homeschooled or if you're public schooled, that your child is locked in if they are college bound. And what that means is, yes, making sure all your legal ducks are in a row with the state of Florida, all that stuff too, but making sure that your kid is getting those core required classes. And the big ones that come into play are 4 years of math, and that can be broken down into semesters, but it is really important that they at least go through pre-calculus to actually be competitive. Another big thing is 4 years of English, 4 years of science, and at least 2 years of a foreign language. Now, if they are dual enrolling, which does make them more competitive most of the time, then that can be condensed into a semester. So for example, they can do like Spanish 1 on a fall semester and Spanish 2, and that does count towards the 2 years. But getting those basic requirements in a row, and make sure you refer online and check out into your state's requirements, what is required to graduate, but making sure you get those core requirements in place and take those in a rigorous way, not just a side note, then that will help make your kid more competitive. And we have noticed that the homeschoolers who dual enroll and take those hard dual enrollment classes actually do tend to outperform the kids in traditional honors classes in public high schools. Now, the other things to note is if your kid was in a traditional public high school, they would likely be involved in clubs, activities, sports, you name it. You still have to take that approach with homeschoolers, but you have a lot more options. And the nice thing is, if you homeschool your high schooler, they're gonna have more time in the day than your traditional public school kid, which you probably already know, which is why you probably chose to homeschool, but that's beside the point. What that means is, instead of just having your kid have all this free time, use that free time strategically. If they like sports, they can do public school sports or they can do private sports. If they like volunteering, have them go deep into that. But to be able to compete with their public school kids, they need to be heavily involved in extracurriculars. It doesn't matter if it's sports, it doesn't matter if it's church, but what the colleges are looking for that are more competitive actually is leadership. So if they are a big jock and athlete and they go hard in those sports, have them and encourage them be leaders in that. And same thing with church. Kids are really multifaceted humans, even as and they turn into multifaceted adults. And colleges are looking for that holistic kid. Like, yes, they're looking for a kid that's smart on paper, has great grades, but they're also getting really, really serious about kids being holistic and being involved and into leadership activities. So that is also really important. And another fun edge that no one seems to talk about is kids that actually do paid work, like on the books paid work, tend to be more solid candidates because it shows the universities that these kids have work experience and they are going to bring that to the table. Now, let's talk about SAT, ACT, and even CLT. So that is kind of my sweet spot. So if you don't know me, I own a private tutoring company. I teach SAT, ACT, and CLT, and I'm going to give you like a mini rundown for homeschoolers. One is homeschoolers are consistently outperforming public school students statistically on the SAT and the ACT. It's been researched, it's been studied, and it seems to happen time and time again. Now, the downside is if a homeschooler has a weak math foundation, that is where they're going to fall behind their public school peers. But this is how you kind of take those standardized tests. Now, one thing to note, because especially if a kid is not dual enrolled, but because they are homeschooled, these colleges are going to look very, very closely at your child's SAT and ACT scores. So they need to take it very seriously. And I'll talk about the CLT in a second too. But this is going to be one of the validators of your transcript. So if you are doing what is quote unquote called a mom homeschool transcript, and you say your child has A's in Algebra 2, they really need to show that they are an A student on their SAT or their ACT. But the good news is with your flexibility, you have more time to prep and put in that work. So a little bit of rundown. So the ACT is different than the SAT. The ACT is really good for our more reading-based kids that struggle a little bit more in math. My kids that are stronger in reading, that are fast in reading, and have really solid grammar skills do a little bit better on the ACT, and it's actually a little bit easier to improve a child's score. The math is only one section, and now it's like one of those things that as long as you're using and facilitating a graphing calculator well, you can survive the ACT math if you put in the legwork. Now the SAT is 50% ELA and 50% math, and it is now a computer-based only test. What that means is if your child is weak in math, and most of the time the kids that have not finished pre-calculus are going to struggle with SAT math, not because it's needed, but because of the deeper comprehension of math on the SAT, then I would lean towards the SAT. So my super strong math kids love the SAT, and vice versa. My super strong reading kids love the ACT. And honestly, for me, it depends on the day, which is going to be my favorite test. Now I want to talk about the CLT. The CLT keeps coming out there, and it's the classical learning test. Do we teach it? Yes. A lot of public schools use it as a graduation requirement when a kid has not gotten their correct test score to graduate. But the CLT is a rough test. It is classical literature based. And for me, with public school kids, I don't like to do that test because most of them hate poetry. I hate poetry, or do not have a classical education. And what we have learned is that even people with classical education, it is really dang hard to improve their kids' scores. So I typically recommend that people do the SAT or the ACT over the CLT. The data's there, the scores are better, and we even did an experiment where we had one of our top scoring master's degree in English take the CLT, who also almost made a perfect score the first time on her ELA on the SAT, really struggled with the CLT, and she coaches it and does fairly well, but it is just a rough test. So I say that as a word of caution if you are considering the CLT. Okay, so let's kind of boil this all down. We've talked a little bit about how certain courses are important, especially your math for for homeschooled and even dual enrollment. We've talked about the test scores that are important, and I didn't go into the numbers, but I will reference them below of the Florida Bright Futures requirements. But in general, you need to have high as possible SAT and ACT scores if your kid wants to go to a really competitive college, which is right now the public universities. We also talked a little bit about how important extracurriculars are to validate and build a holistic viewpoint of a kid that will be later reflected in the resume. So what do you do with all this information? Well, hopefully your kid is maybe a sophomore or freshman at this time. And if that's the case, let us know in the comments. Or you're seeing this and your kid is a senior. You're not out of luck. You just need to know what is on the table. One is, if your kid is applying for competitive colleges, please have them go hard and get as high as possible score for their SAT or ACT. It's going to validate their experience as a homeschooler with academia and prove to those public universities. Two is, if your kid is a junior especially, make sure you check out the link below that is going to be an admissions guide for homeschooling parents in Florida, and make sure you understand and help get your kid in more competitive situations so that they can compete with their peers. But most importantly, make sure to encourage your kid along the way that college admissions have gotten really competitive, and it's not the same that it used to be even when I was applying for college, which doesn't even feel like that long ago. So regardless, encourage your homeschooler. We are with them along the way. And if this video was helpful for you in any way, please drop us a comment and hit that subscribe button, and we will be posting more tips and tricks.